Well, good evening, everyone. I pray that things are well for each of you as you join us on this evening. Monday night message. Yes, it's a time to do a deeper dive into the message that we started on this past Sunday. First of all, I want to say good evening to each of you and those of you who are on the YouTube channel this evening. I normally don't post the deeper dives on the YouTube channel, but I believe I need to post it because there's a lot of people who are following this particular message, and this message I think is going to be a liberating message for a lot of individuals who are seeking to be liberated from cognitive dissonance, who's seeking to be liberated from the enslavement of the mind that religion has had on so many of us. And so I welcome each of you this evening. As we get started this evening, if you have not had the opportunity to visit the teaching from this past Sunday, please feel free to do that at the conclusion of tonight's message or sometime over the next week. It's good to see you all who are in the Zoom room and those of you who are joining by way of the YouTube channel. I am Greg Stanton, also known as a SAR. Okay, and so I go by both. I go by Greg. Those from the old neighborhood who know me as Greg, those who just recently met me and I've introduced myself as a SAR. It's just a name that says a lot about who I am and the guiding principles behind what I do. So this evening, we want to do a deeper dive into the message that we started on this past Sunday, where we were talking about recognizing religious gaslighting. And the two terms that we dealt with was gaslighting and cognitive dissonance. So I want to go a little deeper into that tonight. The reason why we're in this conversation, because there is a lot of gaslighting that taking place in all of the major religions, but I'm only concerning myself with those who are engaging Christianity and have come to a place where things are not adding up, even those individuals who have yet to come to that place. But ultimately, I believe everyone is going to come to this place. I had a strange encounter probably in the year 1996. It was a Sunday evening, afternoon. Service was over and everybody had cleared the building. And I usually would go through and just make sure everything was locked up, give me a time to decompress from the Sunday service. And so as I was walking through the sanctuary, I heard not a voice, but I just heard in my spirit that this will not always be. And it was saying this frequency I was picking up was saying to me that the church as we knew it, and at that time it said in 20 years, it would not be the way it is. And I would have to say that 20 years later, that the church isn't the way it used to be. The religious conversation does not have a lockhole or lockdown on how conversations are guided. So we're in a very interesting time. We are in a transitional period. If you study the Bible, if you're familiar with the Bible characters and situations, we're likened to the time of when you look at the story of Moses and when he came back down off of the Mount Sinai, and that he was disturbed with the people at the foot of the hill because they were going somewhere. They were leaving an age, going into a new age. They were leaving the age of the calf or the bull, and they were at that time going into the age of Aries, the ram. And when he came back down, they had built this calf, golden calf, or this bull, and they were going back to that which they were familiar with, but that which was over. And we're at that point. When I was a kid, there was a song. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And that was 1968, somewhere in there, the fifth dimension. And it was a song that was saying that we are moving into something very different than what we were accustomed to. Those of us who were born in the 60s were on the backside, and those who born from the 60s to now are on the backside of the Piscean age, even though the Piscean age has slipped away. No longer is that constellation in the sky, on the eastern sky. And now we find that the Aquarian constellation is moving in. We haven't gone all the way into the Aquarian age, but before age sets in, there's an overlap of the old and the new, which causes a lot of cognitive dissonance. Individuals who are open to the frequency of now and hearing things, seeing things, having conversations that are far in advance of those who of their peers appear to be weird or appear to be not so much today, because we live in a day and age where you can be weird and be normal. You could think differently and not be ostracized for the most part. But when it comes to religion, we still at the place that if you're thinking differently, you do get ostracized. And so what I wanted to do this evening is to kind of run through a couple of things as it pertains to the topic that I've been dealing with. I want to run through the issues of gaslighting and how it impacts the church, how it has impacted the Black church for the most part. You see my pet here, my pet elephant. I know it's in the room. I know it's kind of weird as though, wait a minute. He has this elephant in the room with him. I love what you can do with digital media. And so you can see this elephant. There isn't an elephant that is in the church. And it's been in the church for a long time. And it was a baby. And now it's grown, full blown, and it's observable. And people are understanding that that's not a bench. That's the elephant's foot you've been sitting on. They understand that the wind you've been feeling is not the air, but it's the waving of the flapping of the elephant's ears. And finally, we're realizing that there is an elephant in the room. And we want to talk about that tonight. I want to talk about religious gaslighting. And when we talk about religious gaslighting, we first start with the elephant that's in the room. Now, when you hear a person say that there is an elephant in the room, we're usually talking about an idiom, a saying. And it's the saying that the definition of this saying is it's a major problem or controversial issue that is obviously present, but at the same time, because of the uncomfortableness of addressing it, we avoid the subject. We avoid looking at it. But tonight I want to begin to look at some things as it pertains to the Black church. So we're going to start with the formulating of the definition that I gave you earlier this week, and the definition of gaslighting. I'm looking here to make sure that if there's any questions or anything, if you need to raise your hand tonight, make sure you do that. I want you to do that. So gaslighting is a term we use a lot, or you see people throw around, but I don't think we really know the definition or the validity of the term. Gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse. Now, when we look at the church, we don't often talk about psychological abuse, but when we used to talk about cults, we will talk about the psychological abuse that the cult leaders perpetuated on the followers. But we weren't able to look at the mote in our own eyes because it was a normative cult. A lot of people, it's no longer a cult when the masses are following this thing. But gaslighting is a psychological abuse, a form of psychological abuse in which a person or a group of people causes someone or an individual or a group of individuals to question their own reality, their own sanity, the essence of who they are. And it's done with the express purpose of, yes, controlling people. Now, when we talk about controlling, we go back to the term religion. The term religion, when you look it up, it's a Latin term, religare, and it means to tie to or to tie back. Okay, like when you tie something, when you tie an elephant as a baby elephant, if it's tied to a stake, while it's a baby, that stake can hold that elephant. And there comes a point after being gaslighted to believe that it cannot break away, it stops trying. And as the elephant grows, this little stake in the ground has the ability to hold that elephant. And then there comes a point where you can even take the chain off the stake or take the chain away from around the leg of the elephant, and the elephant has grown comfortable with a certain circumference that it operates within. And religion has a tendency to do the same thing, to tie us to a set of beliefs, no matter how false they may be, but because they're espoused, we're gaslighted, we tend to take them on. And I want you to begin to slow down and think about how religion has actually been perpetuated through the use of gaslighting. Now, a gaslighters, what they have a tendency to do is confuse, intimidate, and disempower people. When we look at Christianity in particular, in the time of the crusade, it advanced based on intimidation. It advanced based on disempowering people, first physically and then mentally, psychologically. And they do it for the purpose of controlling that group of individuals and promoting the abuser's interests. Now, an individual who lives inside of gaslighting with the express purpose of destroying someone else is most likely a narcissist. Now, I just so happen to have a background in psychology. I spent my graduate work in the area of counseling psychology, so I'm familiar with a lot of different terms that helps us understand human behavior. And sometimes we use these terms jokingly, but we've never come to understand what they really mean. When we talk about gaslighting, it lies on a spectrum, and a spectrum would be like a continuum, and it can be from like 0 to 10. So gaslighting can be minimal, or it could be with a level of intensity. Some gaslighters don't even know that they're gaslighting and are largely unaware. A lot of people that you encounter who are not now narcissists, they are gaslighting because that's just a tool they're using. But a lot of narcissists, gaslighting is part of their makeup. So some people are unaware, but I believe when you understand the history of the Christian church. Now, when I say the Christian church, I'm talking about the church that evolved from 300 BC, okay? Before Christ was ever born. The Christian church started around 300 BC. So this thing didn't just happen. There was a formulation of this thing made for the perfect story. And because most people don't know the history, when you hear something like this, it's a mystery to you. But when you understand from 300 BC all the way to 300 AD, that 600-year period, that it was the formulation of this religious system with the express purpose of conquering the world and conquering people. The Roman Catholic Church was built to control people. Now, so we're talking about gaslighters. We're talking about who the Romans were. Now, if you don't understand your oppressor, you tend to take on the behavior of the oppressor. Now, there's certain things when we look at our oppressor. Now, there's a book I have that I've read bits and pieces of over the last, I don't have the date in this book, but I've read it. It came out in 1994, and I've had this copy since about 1995. It's called The Yurugu. The Yurugu. An African-centered critique of European cultural thought and behavior, written by Marimba Ani. The Yurugu moves the mass from the European facade and thereby reveals the inner workings of global white supremacy. See, this is another term we don't want to deal with. We confuse white power with black power, or we confuse black power with white power. They will have you believe that anybody espousing black power is espousing the same thing that white power espouses. White power was built on very narcissistic behavior. Black power was built as a response to, one, not allowing white power just to take over. So this conversation I'm having tonight is not about me having an issue with individuals of European descent, but I'm just telling you what's been happening. Now, I have no problem with individuals who treat me right. I treat them right. I have no problem with individuals who don't care for me. I stay away from them. But I also have no problem with being culturally proud and astute. And that's what the church would have us to acculturate, that we all become one. But source, divine intelligence, did not make us all one, because there was a reason for the variety. Now, in this book, the Yurugu removes the mask from the European facade and thereby reveals the inner workings of global white supremacy, a system which functions to guarantee the control of Europe and her descendants, the few, over the majority of the world's people, the many. It is a devastating critique which uniquely focuses on the intellectual, cognitive rules by which this system, this matrix that we're in, of dominance operates, the assumption, ascendance, and the valorization of the rational mode. Dr. Marima Ani exposes the roles of both the academic and the Christian establishment in proselytizing as universal that which is indeed culturally specific to Europe, and which therefore functions in the interests of European dominance, since that is the nature of the assili. You need to go to the bookstore, get this book, or sit in the bookstore and read through this book, and I guarantee you will purchase this book. It talks about the phenomenon of cultural imperialism. If it is to be distinguished from strictly militaristic, political, and economic components, is that what strikes the death blow. So this book is a deep book. I encourage you to look at that. Now, I have decided that I can't do traditional Christianity, because I have come to find that the cognitive dissonance was so great, because I was continuing to subject myself to narcissistic systems that does not represent my highest and greatest good. Now, what is a narcissistic personality disorder? People with narcissistic personality disorders act on selfishness and frequently behave in ways that dismiss the feelings of others, okay? Because you can't do what was done to Africans without being narcissistic. You had to have a narcissist. Now, everybody that did it wasn't narcissistic, but they were influenced by the heads, the leaders were narcissistic in positioning, and they had enough influence on others because of selfish gain that people live their lives inside of at the cost of others. They lack empathy, pursue control over others by utilizing tactics such as manipulation, lying, bullying, and guess what? Gaslighting. That's why I had to bring this conversation or this term gaslighting into the forefront, because a lot of what we believe, now beliefs not always based on truth, but beliefs are based on influences. We've been influenced by gaslighters. According to the DSM, that's the diagnostic manual used by therapists when they are assessing an individual for a psychological disorder. A person with narcissistic personality disorder demonstrates a pattern of grandiosity, that is, acting as though they are significantly better than others. And how many Christians do we know that act that way, or Christianity is positioned as though it's better than everything? It's the end all be all, okay? A need for admiration, pervasive lack of empathy, present in various relationships and contexts. While there are many signs of a narcissist, a person must meet at least there's 5 criteria a person must meet in order before you can consider them a full-blown narcissist. Now, a lot of people won't meet that criteria as narcissists, but a lot of people will have certain narcissistic behavior because of the society that we live in. So I'm going to give you tonight some things that you can do to deal with religious gaslighting. I don't want to say spiritual gaslighting, because people who truly are spiritual make space for you to be who you are, express as you are. People who are religious are trying to get you to join their group, believe like them, and if you join the group and don't think like them, act like them, conform to them, then you're ostracized. When you're in a group of people who are truly spiritual, they make space for you to have your expressions. Because one of the things those who are spiritual realize, that the universe has a way of correcting wrongs. So you don't have to concern yourself with that. So we're talking about gaslighting tonight. But we're talking about gaslighting from the perspective of the religion. And so I want you to be clear. There's a difference between religious religion and being spiritual. Spiritual people don't gaslight. Religious people have a tendency to gaslight more. Now, we talked about religion being a personal set of institutionalized, systematic teachings that affects attitudes, beliefs, and practices. Okay, religion can be a cause, principle, or system of beliefs that are held with honor and faith. And we looked at a map this past week. So if you get the chance to look at the video, there's a map inside of that to show you that the vast majority of the world, or they would have you to believe at least, that the vast majority of the world are Christians. The second biggest population would be Islam, and then we have Judaism, and we have Hinduism, and some of the other religious systems. But the issue is, why is it that the vast majority of people are not European, but the vast majority of indigenous people follow after a European expression of religion? And it's because just like Islam, Christianity was advanced at the sword, advanced it through physical means, advanced through psychological means, and it continued to grow and hold those who were believers to their belief system based on the threat of, oh, you may not die at the point of a sword, but you will die and go to hell. So the whole conversation of hell is a controlling factor. Many people believe in him, believe in their heart, confess with their mouth that Christ is Lord, so that they can avoid hell. Not so much about going to heaven, because if it was about going to heaven, when someone had a sickness or disease that is, say, the end of life is near, they should be really happy to be moving into that realm. But because I think that hell has a more of a larger influence of the unknown, then people don't want to die. Individuals who are spiritual in nature tend to have a easier time with the transition of life and with life challenges. So, religious gaslighting. And so I introduced the conversation about gaslighting was used to convert the Africans to Christianity. And one of the reasons why gaslighting first started being used was to help the European who was committing these atrocities. Now, notice, you must say, the majority of the Europeans who were committing the atrocities were not narcissistic, but the ones who were at the helm, most likely, if you had the opportunity to do a mental health assessment on them, you will find that they hit the scale as narcissists, and because of they have control. And see, if you ever ask yourself if you are a narcissist, the truth is you're not a narcissist, because a narcissist would never ask himself if he's a narcissist, because a narcissist operate as if I'm okay. You're okay, I'm okay. If you're not okay, I'm still okay. And so they don't concern themselves. So when we talk about the gaslighting can be used, the misinformation or the misapplication of truth in a way that it adulterates it. Because I have to say that, because when you understand the formation of Christianity, it was built on, see, a little leaven the whole lump. It was built on some basic truths. Now, if you want to get another book, I encourage you to help you understand the correlation between Christianity and the spiritual system that the individuals from the Nile Valley practice, or the lifestyle that they live was a spiritual life. That they didn't have churches. Even when you may see the Europeans saying that they had priests, the priest of An or the priest from Amen. They weren't priests in the sense as our priests today. Okay, so and that word priest is not even an original word. It's not contextually found inside of the indigenous borders or the borders of Africa. That's an imposed term. See, what has happened is the Europeans have taken upon themselves to define the world through their own lenses. Now, I have no problem with the individuals defining the world from their perspective, but we also have to leave space for others to define their world from their perspectives. So, you can have a Afrocentric mindset, or you can have a Southern cradle mindset, or you can have a Westernized cradle mindset, but make space for other people to have their belief system. So this book, Spirituality Before Religions, Spirituality is Unseen Science, and Science is Seen Spirituality, by Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene. Now, reason why I have books that I reference, because so many people are teaching you things, sharing things with you, but they don't give you the source. And sometimes if you can go to the source and fact check what has been given to you through the source documents, and even go do a peer review of whatever topic you may be studying, and you don't just study it from the individuals who, like, I didn't study Christianity just from those who are Christians, but I studied Christianity from those who weren't Christians. What were they seeing? What could they could see something that I couldn't see because I was up close on it. So that's a good book. Then the other book that I really recommend, because it helps you understand cognitive dissonance, is, again, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing, by Dr. Joy LeGroux. I recommend those 3 books amongst other books. And why am I having you to start tonight thinking about gaslighting? As now, when we talk about gaslighting, we've already defined gaslighting. We define that gaslighting is when you are psychologically attempting to manipulate someone. You're looking to, again, it's a psychological abuse. Okay, and it's intentional in most cases. The African were subjugated to gaslighting. Not only the African, the whole world has been subjugated to gaslighting. Anywhere there's control, there's gaslighting going on. So we're going to look at that tonight from the perspective of how do you move away from it once you recognize it. I started this evening talking about cognitive dissonance. And this past weekend, I shared with you out of the book what cognitive dissonance was. Cognitive dissonance, she gave us a great definition of cognitive dissonance. She said, when you commit a negative act or think about doing so, most of us get uncomfortable unless you're a narcissist. This discomfort is caused by the difference between of our action and what we believe about ourselves. So a narcissist has no problem doing something that hurts you. The one thing about this book, the Yurugu, what this psychologist did, Black psychologist, is she studied the cultural thought and behavior of Europeans. Now, one thing you have to know, anytime you study a people group, you also have to make space for outliers. That is, though you may say the masses of these people act this way, there's some people who may not act this way. But so you have to be very careful that you don't stereotype people into definitions, but also be wise enough to know that, or rule out, does this definition apply? And so in this book, she did something else that I really liked. She has a chapter called The Power of Definition. Most of us have found ourselves deeply engrossed in a conversation with a friend or a peer where someone tries to no avail to convince the group that his or her view is correct and true. Two common strategies are employed in order to convince the errant disbeliever. The first is to state that the point being presented can be substantiated as true because it is found in the book. Christians do that all the time. Individuals who are proselytizing a certain religious system go back to their book, and they get you to have the conversation from inside of their book, even if you don't know anything about their book. Oftentimes, there's this group of brothers who are standing on the corner. I'd say who they are. They are Hebrew Israelites. They use the Bible. They try to get, sometimes I stand back and observe the tactics. One of the tactics that they use, which is a form of psychological abuse, is they have a mic and you don't have a mic. And so their voices are projected through this microphone system. And so as a result of that, when you're talking to them, you have to elevate your voice. And one thing that happens when you elevate your voice, you also elevate your emotional sensory system. And so they get you pulled into this conversation based on emotionalism. And when the emotionalism goes up, rationalism goes down. And you end up looking like a fool. You ever get in conversation with them, make it your business to talk low, to the point where they have to say, speak up. And no, you tell them to turn down the mic. And don't change your voice, and watch what happens. So she says in this, this is a form of gaslighting. The first thing they do is state that the point being presented can be substantiated as true because it's found in the book. And as such, confirms their position to be true. Because it's in the Bible, it's true. So you're gaslighted to believe that the Bible, the Holy Bible, comes from God, comes from the divine intelligence. Not realizing that if you look in the front side of that Bible, it's going to say Zondervan, it's going to say, whatever, but it also will say King James Version. King James and God are not the same person. And why would source, divine intelligence, take an unintelligent, take a low morality person to develop his book? See, sometimes we don't think. The second strategy is to state that that which is being espoused has been scientifically proven. What we often believe to be scientific fact is no more than a strongly held, unsubstantiated belief. Hence, not all that is written in a book or touted to be science can be accepted as truth. Now, if that works in the world of science, it also works in the world of religion. How did we get here? To fully appreciate the depths of misconceptions, misunderstandings, and outright lies that underpin the dehumanization of Africans and their descendants, we first need to be clear about some basic concepts and how they relate to each other. Following definitions are taken from Webster's dictionary. Now, why am I saying this? Because there's been no other people group that has been dehumanized at the level that Africans have been. Africans in the diaspora, those who are down in Brazil, those who are in the Bahamas, those who are in North America. We have been dehumanized to the point where we have issue with loving ourselves. And these are all traits of what happens to when a person is gaslighted with intensity, gaslighted deliberately over years, hundreds of years. She lists 6 words that you need to become familiar with. First, we need to be able to differentiate between an opinion, a belief, a fact, a truth, science, and theory. A belief or opinion is a belief or judgment based on grounds insufficient to produce complete certainty. That's an opinion. It's a personal view. Belief, something believed, opinion, conviction. Confidence in the truth of or existence of something not immediately susceptible to rigorous proof. Fact, something that actually exists. Something known to exist or have happened. A truth known by actual experience or observation, something known to be true. And it's really sad that when you study the New Testament, beyond the individuals who believe in it and teach it, but when you do a critical critique, you'll find that many of the individuals that were supposed to have lived, can't be found. No markers, no graves, which is vastly different from individuals who lived 4, 5, 6,000 years ago in the Nile Valley. We can still find their graves, we can find their tombs, we can find artifacts, but we cannot find artifacts to substantiate the faith in which we believe. So the next word is truth. The true or actual state of a matter. Now, this is important right here. A verified or indisputable fact. How much of your beliefs that you hold have you verified as indisputable facts? So a truth is a verified, indisputable fact, proposition, or principle or the like. Science, a branch of knowledge or studying, dealing with a body of facts or truths about the physical or material world, gained through observation and experimentation. And lastly, theory. A theory is a proposed explanation whose status is still conjectural. And so a lot of what we have, what we call our beliefs, are really just beliefs. They're not substantiated on fact. We hope, and the hope gets so strong that we have faith. But faith and fact is not the same thing. Why am I saying these things to you? Because many of you have these conversations with yourself about your belief system. Many of you have tried to leave, but find yourself going back. Many of you have left and had to deal with the ostracizing effects of your family or gaslighting. making you think you made the wrong decision. So I have chose to leave traditional Christianity, even though it may appear I'm still in it. But if you're up and close and personal with me, you'll find that it appears that I'm still in it, because what I have done is deconstructed adulterated Christianity and taken it back to some very basic tenets from which Christianity was built upon. And it appears as though I'm still there, but I'm really not there. Because I got tired of the gaslighting. And as a pastor, I got tired of realizing, I came to the realization that I was gaslighting. Because a lot of things I was teaching, I could not substantiate. So I started teaching them. Like I never taught about hell, because that never sat well with me. It didn't add up. I never taught about a rapture, because that never added up. The word's not even in the Bible. I never taught that everybody came from Adam and Eve, because if you got to teach that Adam and Eve were the only people in the earth, then you have to say it's okay for intermarriage, sexual activity amongst family members. But we know that's not right. We know scientifically that if you continue to do that, there's going to be some impacts on the genetic structure. But we take myths as true messages, instead of understand that a myth has a message. So we get caught up in the myth and we miss the message. The messenger has a message, but we get caught up in the messenger and miss the message. So what are we going to do about that? We have experienced cognitive dissonance as a result of spiritual or religious gaslighting. Gaslighting, people do it when we commit a negative act or think about doing so. We get uncomfortable, and to become comfortable in the doing the wrong thing, we have to justify it through gaslighting. And until you understand who gave you your Bible, until you understand their cultural worldviews, you're going to think that it must be okay. Or you're okay with your oppressor. Now, let's think about that. When will the oppressor give you something that truly liberates you? When the oppressor's goal is to keep you oppressed and depressed. But because we can't fathom that as Black people, because of our makeup, because of our design, we can't fathom that people could be so narcissistic that they would do what they have done. When people show you who they are, believe who they are. So I'm going to take the next 10 minutes to kind of, because if you listen to my message over again from Sunday, you'll get the more of the meat of what gaslighting is all about, and how post-traumatic slave syndrome is a direct result of being gaslighted, and how as long as you hold on to a religious system that is given to you by the oppressor, that was put together using, part of gaslighting is to lie. So a bunch of lies. So I'm going to look at 7 ways, or should I say 7 things you can do if you've been gaslighted. So the first thing is know how to recognize when gaslighting is happening and when it is happening to you. Gaslighting is a psychological, manipulative tactic to get a person, again, or a group of people to doubt their reality. to doubt their expression, their experience. They had to dehumanize us in order to make it okay with them to do what they were doing to us. Okay? The term stems from a movie from 1938 called The Gaslight. Get a chance to look that up. So we want to become familiar with what it sounds like. Some of the common phrases that people use when they're gaslighting. You're making things up. They'll say that. When you start telling them that you've studied and found that what you've been taught is wrong, they'll say you're making that up. Okay? Or it didn't happen that way. Or you're being overly sensitive about this thing. Like you're overly sensitive that the oppressor didn't give us this, God gave it to us. Okay? That's when once you can effectively recognize when gaslighting is happening or has happened. Okay, first when it's happened and when it's still happening in a moment, then you can start breaking the cycle. But as long as you have no clue about what gaslighting is and how people use gaslighting, you will continue to be gaslighted. We know people gaslight people in the workplace, employers gaslight employees, managers, relationships, husbands gaslight wives, or wives gaslight husbands, parents gaslight children. It's something we do. So the second thing you can do is once you have to acknowledge that you've been gaslighted, you begin to stand firm in your truth. And so part of standing firm in your truth may mean leaving the place you really want to be. The goal of gaslighting is to have the receiving person doubt their perception. For the person who is doing the gaslighting, their goal may be to avoid accountability. That's what happens because Christianity was the engine by which the enslavement process was built on. It was a different kind of, it was chattel slavery. It was a dehumanization. And so they used gaslighting as a way to become comfortable with what they were doing. So when you are standing firm, it means you are owning your own perception. What you know. Not what you believe, but what you know, what you feel. If it don't feel right, in most cases, it's not right. So you have to stand firm with the realization, though early on, you may have a small realization, but it's that little realization that will expand itself and wipe out all the mistruths that you've experienced. Another thing you might have to do is you need to write some things down. You got to write down some of the stuff that you come in contact with as you study to show yourself approved, a workman who need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. You write down some things to help you ground yourself in your new truth, your own truth. One way of writing things down is having a library, having some books that you can go to. You know, sometimes you will encounter a gaslighter that will have you question, did I make the right move? Or am I being gaslighted by these group of people? So you want to write it down. You want to have a library. Keep a record of what is happening so you can journal what you're going through. Journal is a great way to maintain record of what is happening over time. How are you feeling over time? You know, because with cognitive dissonance comes a level of unsurety. You know, you're vacillating. Another thing you want to do when you are in this new reality, you want to keep the conversations to a minimum with those who are in the thing you're moving away from. Or they also say, keep it simple. Know your purpose when entering the conversation with somebody who is still inside of what you've come out of. And be okay with letting them know, I'm good. I'm not trying to convince you. Like, my page is not here to convince anybody to leave, but my page operates with the law of attraction. Like-minded people are being drawn to the page because there they find the information that begins to liberate them. So I don't go out to pick fights. I don't even engage in arguments. Because when a person has a position, the worst thing they want to experience is defeat. But when you are responsible to self and you come into the realization of, I've been studying this, I've been hearing this, but I'm not getting what it says it should be giving me. And it makes me feel worse than more times than not. Be willing to leave old conversations. The person who is doing the gaslighting may be also use tactics such as deflecting and minimizing. Sometimes you have to tell the pastor, I'm done. I'm through. I'm moving on. I'm okay. Don't even stick around for the conversation that they're going to have to try to lasso you back into it. For if God is God and he cares about you, I'm using religious conversation now. When you're going down the wrong path, why wouldn't God intervene? That's God's responsibility. So until God intervenes, you keep going away from where you've been. Be willing to leave the conversation. Give yourself permission to leave the conversation of the church for a minute. I left it for a minute. But then I had some very real experiences. So I had to go back and say, wait a minute, I had some experience. I saw people healed. I was healed. I saw the power of prayer. But then I had to begin to dissect what was prayer. Come to find out, it was really meditative thought. And so I began to reformat my spiritual belief system. Remember, the goal of a person who is gaslighting you is to have you doubt your perception. So walking away before the gaslighting gets started again is the best thing you can do. Don't worry about trying to outsmart. Don't ever try to outsmart the gaslighter because you're getting called into his or her game. Don't argue. Wait a minute. First of all, the reality is the majority of the preachers you know make their livelihoods off of preaching that doctrine. And they're not going to go contrary to it if it means that it's going to cost their livelihood. A minister who is bivocational is more likely to be open to addressing lies than a minister who is not bivocational. If his livelihood is based on the plate, I'm not talking about at his table, but the offering plate, then he's going to continue to do what he needs to do in order to substantiate and live the life that he's accustomed to living. So not going to change, he or she is not going to change their belief because that's how they live. That's their angle. And I'm not saying that they're doing it diabolically. Some are, some no. Many who have been through the schools of theology, they know. Now, your average preacher who just wake up and say, I've been called and haven't taken Greek, Hebrew, have not studied other religions, they probably only know the Bible. But any one of your theologians who have studied, they may still try to hold on to, but because of the expansion of knowledge and information and science and research today, a lot of what they used to use to defend their faiths don't hold water. So it can be very disorienting to continue to have conversations with people, individuals who are pushing religious systems that you know don't serve you. Get out the conversation. Leave it alone. So tonight, I just wanted to kind of let you know that the onus is on you. For those who are teetering on moving away from it, no, you're going to feel some disorientation. No, you're going to go through the isolation. But then you got to be very careful too. Because just like there's gaslighters in the church, just like the religious the religious conversationalists use gaslighting. Those who are awoke, cultural folk, use just as much gaslighting. I take time and I study and I listen to people who are espousing supposedly principles and practices that are Kemetic in orientation. Conjecture for most of them. They can't read the meta-netter. And some who say they can, it's questionable. It's interesting that you're reading the meta-netter based on research that was done by the oppressor. Now, there's some people who really have taken it upon themselves to learn the meta-netter. But for the most part, the average person you meet, they're reading somebody else's stuff, just the way I don't know Greek, I don't know Hebrew, but I know how to get the Strong's Concordance. I know how to get certain aids to help me break down the Hebrew and the Greek word. And there's some same things I use to break down Kemetic words and Kemetic principles. We got to have balance in this thing. You got to be careful that people who are gaslighting you are doing it because they want to control you. And a lot of times people in the conscious community are still trying to control you, keep you on your page. Here's gaslighting. You go onto a person's page, or not a page, but you go on a YouTube channel, and it takes them 30 minutes into the YouTube channel before they really get to content. You've just been gaslighted. You've just been manipulated to stay on their page for 30 minutes in order that they could get viewership time, make the metrics up. And so everybody that looks like you don't always have your best interest in mind. Because this thing called white supremacy, called acculturation, the psyche of Black people have been vastly impacted, that it's going to take some time for us to get to know who we are. And what is the motivation for getting to know who we are? If you can't love yourself, you can't love the God you can't see. Because the God you can't see is inside of me, inside of you. So tonight, I just wanted to lay a little deeper foundation in regards to gaslighting and how gaslighting is used. And next week, I'm going to spend a little bit more time dealing with cognitive dissonance. Just as well as the individual who is doing something wrong to hurt individuals experience cognitive dissonance, and they have to come up a way with making it okay. The person who's trying to do right and come out of wrong, who's trying to think right and been in wrong thinking, will experience cognitive dissonance. So I'm going to go into that on next week. Well, we're right at the 9 o'clock hour. I do want to catch the rest of this Bears game, but I wanted to come over here and look and see if there's anything that somebody has said that needs to be shared, particularly. Betty said, oh my goodness, this is starting off very powerful. I have gotten a download over the weekend, and this will not last always. The greater is now, and to move in that knowing. Yes, move into the knowing. Wow, I know I am in the right place. Yes, you are. I remember that song. She was talking to us about the song that I had there. So I don't see this information is powerful and profound, awesome teaching. I guess it could be mesmerizing. You just like shut down like, whoa, can all of this be true? Yes, it is true. So if you're here this evening and you got a question or a comment, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'm gonna give about 5 minutes and we can have some dialogue for those of you who are part of this conversation tonight. While we're having this wait on the dialogue, I do want to say that I spend my time and do the things I do to bring value into your life, to bring balance into your life. And hopefully that's something I've said, been uplifting and encouraging. If this ministry that I've been called to has been a blessing to you, consider sowing a seed into the ministry, into my life, so that I can use the better part of my time doing things that will bring value to your life. Okay, Betty, I see your hand there. Let me go here. You acknowledge Betty. Betty, you have the mic.
Hello, everyone. Hey, Pastor Greg. I just want to say that this is very informative. Why? Because when you get to the root of where gaslighting started, you can pay attention to gaslighting in your life. I was never aware of gaslighting. I'm going to say maybe over this year, I've kind of understood a little bit about what gaslighting is. And, it's, yes, holding back information, lying. And that goes with the coworker, like you said, relationship, church, all sorts of things. So, yes, you're the only one that I've heard or been in contact with this close that start from the beginning, because a lot of times you got to go back to the beginning to get the truth, and it make so much sense. So those that are listening, it's like now you have a broader eye opener on what gaslighting is, and we can protect ourselves from that. Be aware of it.
Yes, protect ourselves. Save yourself. Everybody has to become self-centered. That is, until you can be your best you, we cannot be our best community.
Yeah.
It's not about you acclimating to what I want you to believe. You got to know your truth. And you have to be bold enough, bodacious enough, bad enough to be willing to break away and stand in your truth. You have to realize there's elephants in our rooms. There's elephants in our families. We know so-and-so has been the molester. Nobody's addressed the molestation. So the best thing you can do is get away.
Yep. And then I want to add before I go that yes, with family members and friends, like when let's just say I'm having a conversation with one of my god sisters or something and having a situation, and I tend to enlighten them with not only what I've been taught and being teaching, but what I've been using and what I know. And everything goes back to the church, and everything goes back to the wrong traditional thinking. Just because grandma said it, that don't mean grandma was right. Just because
Yes.
dad said it, that don't mean dad was right. Yes, we was taught at a younger age not to question the elders. I still don't to this day, but in these cases we have to. And yes, you're going to be looked at like you crazy, but I know that what you're teaching and what I'm learning and what I study on my own time is true because of the evidence that I'm seeing in my life versus from being in the church. So when the conversations don't go right, I sometimes don't talk to people, for a little while, or I was making excuses because these are people that I love until I started coming out, telling them the truth. Like, hey, read this book. Listen, I had this situation and, I did this and this came out of it and this is why. I don't have a whole lot of information, but I have a lot of information around me that I tend to research on, and it just clarifies everything like divinely. So yes, it's a bittersweet thing that some people is not going to go along with you on this journey. They're going to stick to their traditional beliefs and what the church is teaching them. And just like you said, when you open the King James version and you got your name written in that Bible, at the end of the day, it's the inspirational word of God, not the straight out word of God. But we take things and we run with it and we don't do the research, and we go through our whole life. And like right now, I'm in my 30s. So I know there's a lot of people that's in their 30s just like me. Hopefully they're waking up, and I get you, Pastor Greg. We don't need no more people coming into their middle ages and saying, oh my God, wow, I need help. I need this, I need that. They're going to get it. It's going to come naturally. It's their awakening. But it's some people that don't want to wake up because they're afraid of the real truth.
Yes. And sometimes people, like we get gaslighted. Like gaslighting is, you don't question your elders. That's a gas. Because if you can't question your elders, who can you question? Another young person? Yeah. So we have to understand the real issue is not questioning, but you have to be respect. You can ask any question if it's asked properly in the right timing. But when a lot of times gaslighting is say, you don't question the old folk, that's because the old folk was ignorant about something. Yeah. And the more you question them, the more you reveal the light of their ignorance. Yeah. And so we got to be very careful. We've been guilty. Our parents were guilty of gaslighting us also. Not intentionally, but the narcissist who started all of this was intentional and deliberate in this. Now, that's all I got to say this evening. Well, I thank you, Betty, for dropping in and sharing what is on your heart this evening.
Oh, no problem. Peace and blessings to everybody. I'm just grateful. I'm going to stay committed to what I'm doing and help teach others, because that's what it's all about.
Yes, good. Well, I'm glad I had the opportunity to put this on tape. I'm going to edit it out and put it out there. It'll be on the YouTube channel. So those who have ears to hear will listen and go to it. And know this, you don't have to never try to convince someone where you are. You'll know when they're ready because they will ask the question. So when people ask me a question, this is what I will say. What difference will the answer make? If I give you this answer, are you willing to change your belief system? If I can show you that Jesus, Mary, and that God is the first original Trinity that comes from Haru, from Asar, Aset, and Haru, if I can show you that correlation, would you then say that that's all mythological? But they don't want to go there. And if you're not willing to take the information that I'm given and go to work with it, then why waste my time in that conversation?
That's right.
And that's what we all have to learn how to back away.
Mm-hmm.
Back away. Well, it's 9:12, and I know many of you got to go to work tomorrow morning, such as myself, and catch the rest of this game. So breathe. I know I shared a lot with you. Recapitulate. That is, at some time in the next 7 days, replay it, listen to it. You're going to hear things that I've not even said, but the Spirit is going to say to you. You're going to be able to expound on what I've given you with original. You'll come up with an original understanding, original ideas. There's nothing new under the sun, but it's original because of the way you'll be able to formulate it. All right, that's all I have. You guys have a wonderful evening. And we're going to close with the very same.